Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into the world of S&P 500 funds, those investments that everyone seems to be talking about.
That's a pretty hot topic.
Yeah, for good reason. We're looking at a YouTube video by Steve from Call to Leap, and he's kind of like a rock star in the personal finance world.
I've seen some of his stuff. Very straightforward advice.
Exactly. Used to be a teacher, and now he's a self-made millionaire, so he knows a thing or two about investing. In this video, he's breaking down 5 popular S&P 500 funds: SPY, VOO, IVV, FXAIX, and SWPPX. And he uses Yahoo Finance to compare them, which I think is super helpful. So that's what we're going to unpack today.
Sounds like a good plan. But you know what always tricks me up with these S&P 500 funds? Like, there are so many of them, but they all basically track the same 500 companies.
Right. It's overwhelming. Like, how do you even begin to choose? Steve starts by looking at the share price, but honestly, he kind of just glosses over it. And I got to admit, I kind of get hung up on share price. Like, if one fund has a higher price, doesn't that mean it's performing better?
Not necessarily, no. Think of it this way, okay? Imagine 2 pizzas, right? Both cost the same, but one is cut into 8 big slices, and the other one is cut into like 16 smaller slices. You're getting the same amount of pizza, just divided differently.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
With S&P 500 funds, it's similar. A higher share price doesn't automatically mean it's a better investment. They all hold pieces of the same 500 companies, just like the pizzas, the slices are just different sizes.
And that makes so much more sense now. So if share price isn't everything, what should we be looking at?
Steve highlights 2 really important factors, and I think these are key: dividend yield and expense ratios. He uses SPY as an example, showing that its dividend yield is 1.45%, which is like, I think he said about $6 per share every year.
Oh yeah, those dividends are a nice little bonus. But expense ratios, he mentioned SPY has an expense ratio of 0.09%. I'll be honest, I don't really get why that matters so much.
Yeah, they can seem kind of insignificant, right?
Hmm.
But think of it like this. Let's say you invest $10,000, right? Over 30 years, a difference of just 0.1% in those expense ratios, it can cost you thousands of dollars in returns.
Whoa, seriously?
Absolutely. And that's money you could be using for, all those fun things in life.
Yeah, like early retirement
Yeah.
or, at least a nicer vacation.
Yeah.
So those tiny percentages, they really add up over time.
Big time. You also want to think about different fund structures like ETFs versus mutual funds that can also impact your expense ratios.
Oh, right. ETFs are usually cheaper because they're passively managed, right?
Exactly. No fancy fund manager calling the shots, so lower fees. Mutual funds, on the other hand, they have that active management, so you're paying for their expertise.
So it's like choosing between, I don't know, ordering takeout or hiring a personal chef.
Yeah.
Convenience versus personalized service, each with its own price tag.
I like that analogy. And then Steve, he shows you how to see the fund's holdings, which is basically like, a list of all the companies in the S&P 500. Why do you think that matters?
Well, I guess it gives you a peek into the fund's diversification, right? Like,
Yeah.
are they heavily invested in tech or are they spread across different sectors like healthcare and energy?
Bingo. Understanding the holdings helps you figure out the fund's risk level. Tech might be hot now, but it can be volatile, so if you're not comfortable with that, maybe a more balanced fund is better suited for you.
So it's about matching the fund to your risk appetite. You're not just blindly picking any S&P 500 fund. You're actually being strategic about it.
Exactly. Now, while Steve does touch on past performance, he makes a good point that, it's not a guarantee of future returns, and I think that's a good point to hammer home.
Yeah, past performance is just one data point.
Hmm.
But it's something I'm really curious about. Steve mentions all these different funds: SPY, VOO, IVV, and then, FXAIX and SWPPX. Why are there so many if they're all tracking the same 500 companies?
Well, each of those funds is offered by a different provider, like Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab. They all have their own version of an S&P 500 fund. It's
Right.
kind of like, choosing between Coke, Pepsi, or a generic cola.
Okay, I'm with you.
They're all cola, right?
Hmm.
But there might be slight differences in the taste, the sweetness, the caffeine levels, and of course, branding plays a big role too.
So the cola is the S&P 500 companies, but the brand is the fund provider.
Exactly. There might be some differences in those expense ratios or how they handle dividends, but the core ingredients are basically the same.
So it sounds like a lower expense ratio is almost always the way to go. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
For the most part, yeah. but there might be some situations where a slightly higher expense ratio is worth it, if the fund aligns with your investment goals.
Okay, I get it. Like if it focuses on socially responsible investing or something like that.
Exactly. Or maybe it offers some tax advantages. You got to look at the bigger picture.
Now, Steve's video is great for figuring out what to look for, but he doesn't really say how to buy these funds.
Well, he probably wants us to stay tuned for the next video. But it's a good reminder not to jump in head first. Before investing in any S&P 500 fund, really think about your financial goals, how much risk you're comfortable with, and do your homework.
Right, investing isn't a race, it's a marathon, right?
Hmm.
So, as we wrap up here, what other factors do you think people should consider when choosing an S&P 500 fund? Any final words of wisdom?
That's a great question to ponder. There's always more to learn, more research to do, but I think the biggest takeaway here is to choose a fund that aligns with your goals and your comfort level. And remember, it's a long game.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us today, everyone, and happy investing.